Everything is international. We are combining the holistic approach to education of the East with a more analytical approach of the West.
After joining XJTLU and studying with teachers and classmates worldwide, my world expanded. I gained a more diverse perspective and many new ideas.
Before coming to XJTLU, I was already very excited about China's ancient culture. To my surprise though, when I came here, I was also able to witness a lot of advanced technology.
The future society is an ecological society oriented by science and technology. We invite students to think of ways to best integrate and collaborate with AI and robots and strengthen the most human parts in the system.
XJTLU is intended to broaden students' research horizon across disciplinaries.
When we put all the expertise together, this helps the students to work as a group and come up with better solutions.
Many students will worry about the future, but here in XJTLU, we welcome you to the real industry.
Because in future, the boundary between university and the society will disappear.
Our faculty, they are internationally renowned researchers. They truly care for our students.
We always appreciate their ideas, even some crazy idea. You never know, it might happen. This is how the Nobel Prize has been given, because it might become a real.
Through our collaboration with XJTLU, we have improved our industry ecosystem. We can share cutting-edge research findings with students. The students can also infuse our projects with innovative thinking.
Our professors don't force-feed knowledge to us. Instead, they guide and support us in realizing our dreams based on our needs. They make learning experience so fun and provide us extra information about our future career paths that I really, really love.
XJTLU taught me critical thinking and lifelong learning. Through the learning mode, I could acquire new skills and interacting with teachers and alumni every year after graduation.
The students and the professors are always growing together as a community. We're constantly learning from them, improving and adapting our offerings.
You can feel that this university is alive. It's a constantly integrating, self-involving platform, enabling them to act, feel, and think about themselves in new ways. This process always empowers our students.
Certainly in the future, we would face a lot of challenges. Do your best to make a contribution to the future. You would find more opportunities, more colorful, exciting future journey. We would have more competitive global citizens, which will help us to develop a better world for the future. That's my passion. Future is next year or next moment. AI will transform the education from knowledge feeding to people development. To adapt to the quickly development of the world, university should be redefined. XJTLU is trying very hard to reflect what's the future education and reshape the learning and the teaching.
The world is no longer a little oyster. Everything is international. We are combining the holistic approach to education of the East with a more analytical approach of the West.
After joining XJTLU and studying with teachers and classmates worldwide, my world expanded. I gained a more diverse perspective and many new ideas.
Before coming to XJTLU, I was
Good evening, everyone. Dear students, colleagues, and audiences online. Welcome to Professors of XJTLU Public Lecture. 欢迎各位莅临在西普听讲座。I'm Professor Beibei Tang from the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. It's my great honor to be the academic chair of this lecture series. Professors of XJTLU Public Lecture is our university's signature event for scholarly communication and knowledge dissemination. At XJTLU, we now have nearly 80 professors, and we would like to promote our unique research culture through them. This public lecture series will be presented by XJTLU professors from various research fields, showcasing their career-long research, a thorough review of selected research topics, and the latest development in the field. The lecture series will be offered throughout the academic year to XJTLU staff and students and the public. Through stimulating presentations using plain language, the professors of XJTLU Public Lecture Series will explain complex research topics and showcase our university's research impact and contribution to our community and society. Today's speaker is Professor Pavel Castka, who is a professor in the Department of Intelligent Operations and Marketing and the Associate Dean for Professional Engagement for the International Business School, Suzhou at XJTLU. Before joining XJTLU, Professor Castka served as the Associate Dean for Research and MBA Director at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. His research focuses on sustainability and supply chain management, particularly regarding the assurance and the verification of social and environmental claims and practices through innovative and technology-enhanced monitoring. Professor Castka has published in leading academic journals and received large research grants from several funding agencies in Australia, New Zealand, and Germany. His research has advanced the knowledge and the application of innovative approaches in digitalization, food system innovations, and remote practices. He serves as an expert on TC 117 quality management and the International Organization for Standardization. Professor Castka has been repeatedly invited by leading policy-making institutions such as ISO, UNIDO, IUCN, and IAF to discuss topics related to conformity assessment and monitoring practices. In today's lecture, Professor Castka will discuss how sustainability initiatives worldwide are impacted by AI and technological development. Professor Castka will talk for about 1 hour, and then we will open the floor for questions and discussions. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Castka.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your kind words, and welcome everybody, also those who are online. I assume here we are talking about sustainability, so you have some level of interest in the topic. And as was mentioned at the outset of this lecture series, I was trying to do something simple in a meaningful language. This is the third time I'm doing a professorial lecture, and I hope I have learned something about it. But I was also proven wrong yesterday because I had a chat with my friend and they asked me, why do you use this ESG thing? What is it? And I personally don't like acronyms very much. When I came here the first week, especially talking with Olivia, I had no idea what the people are talking about. I was questioning whether this is still English or what is this. So we like to use acronyms. So ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, and it's one of the tools how we manage sustainability. And I also like to thank my colleagues being here from IBSS. We, in fact, do a lot of sustainability-oriented research. We've got the Research Center for Excellence. We also have Associate Dean for Sustainability. Unfortunately, she's teaching right now, right in this moment. And we've got a lot of graduates and students interested in this field. And I believe there is a future jobs. We need more people who invent new things how we live, but also new things how we monitor environmental performance and how we communicate that to people so they can embrace the idea more personally, I would say. So I'm talking today about sustainability. I will be talking about technologies as well, But also I would like you to understand that what I'm talking about mainly here is about using the technology in a way that assists our decision making and inspire us to do things differently. And that will be the point I will make at the end of the talk when I introduce the term of intelligent monitoring and the meaning of it being exactly as I stated, technology, but for the purpose of humanity. So I have prepared for you, hopefully, an entertaining 1 hour. This is my rough plan. I will start talking firstly about sustainability, what it is, and some broader ramifications of what we can observe these days. And we are living in really tough times by all different means, and it also will affect sustainability and how we approach it. I will talk a bit about what are the problems in supply chains, largely to illustrate some of the issues that we are facing, and also use that as a platform to explain what is happening at the moment in terms of monitoring of these issues in supply chains. And I will make an argument that there is a lot of room for improvement. And one way of doing it, and that's part of my work, is to look at the technologies. There are a lot of very exciting new ways how we can do things differently, but we have to work together in some meaningful way, and that will be the part 5 before I conclude. So let me start with sustainability, and I believe if you are interested even to a little degree, you probably came across this definition from the United Nations Brundtland Commission, which is a bit dated, but probably the most widely cited definition. And essentially what the definition is telling us, or encouraging us to think about, is that what we are leaving behind should be something that others can use after us, our children, the future generations, and so on and so forth. There is a good argument in which, or good setting in which this definition worked quite well. Me and my wife, we spent the last 20 years in New Zealand, and this image over here, it's a beautiful Lake Taupo with Mount Cook at the background. And so, of course, we would like to preserve something like that for the future generations, and there is no doubt about that intention and the need to do that. But having spent time in New Zealand, I also observe with others the continuous degradation of the environment. So the image you can see here below, and if you can read from your distance, it says, health warning, don't swim, don't come even closer, don't fish, don't drink the water. And this water is completely dead. And it's not actually that far away from this place, about 150 kilometers. Why I'm mentioning this is also today I'm going to talk about monitoring. And what is particularly interesting is that if you would go upstream this river, you would have a lot of different farms alongside this water. And all of them would pass the environmental monitoring inspection. So the findings from these inspections is that all of those farms are doing actually quite well, which is kind of puzzling because the reason why we have this dead water is actually the impact of the farming. So that gives us the first sort of a window to my topic today, and that is to consider the fact that we invest a lot of activities into monitoring organizations, but not necessarily coming into an effect that we desire. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we need to find some way to do it differently. Now let me talk very briefly about politics, because apart from the fact that sustainability is quite hard to define, and the definition I've introduced is very philosophical, if you like, we also have a lot of different opinions about what sustainability is and how it is pushed forward. And I've got 2 examples I'd like to mention here. One is the war in Ukraine. So that's the image over here, or related to that. And that's the fact that after the war started, a lot of organizations who work in Russia, with Russian forestry, sourcing sustainable wood, had to withdraw their certifications. And that created a huge demand need in the supply chains. So what I'm trying to point at with this example is that the politics always come first when we start talking about various aspects of sustainability. And perhaps there is a good reason to do that, but I'm just making an argument that politics come often first. If we look at the example of Donald Trump, and this quote is coming from 2015, I believe, the first elections he won, he's essentially saying the ESG, and that's that acronym I apologize for, is something that is used really to withdraw money and transfer them to people who he considers being quite radical. And that tells us something about politicization of sustainability itself. And unfortunately, over the years, that become a very important aspect in how people tend to think about sustainability. And where we stand at the moment is that we've got a group of people who support it quite strongly, and we've got quite a significant group of people who don't believe that this is an issue. And as a result of that, we don't have any meaningful conversation about what it constitutes and how we should really move forward to do something together. Now, talking about Donald Trump and what's happening at the moment, the fact that we are facing quite significant economic crisis doesn't help either. And in continuation of the politics impacting sustainability, we have to also consider that once people are fighting for survival, and many organizations will, it will become even more difficult to consider any meaningful way to engage in sustainability. By the way, this image is AI generated, and the red numbers in West means bad, so I should mention that as well. And let me talk a little bit about AI as a consequence of this. We can observe, most of us, I think especially the last 6 months have been quite eventful, if you like, in terms of people talking about AI, maybe too much, and us really being centered around the idea that AI will in some way dominate our lives. And there are all different aspects of it that I find personally fascinating. For example, the whole marketplace around AI influencers. I've only learned about it about a month ago in an event in Shanghai, where actually there was a lot of data disclosed about the fact that these influencers have millions of followers who essentially follow an unreal person living in the unreal world, talking about unreal things. And it tells us something about what is possible, and maybe if we think about how to transfer this willingness of people to engage into sustainability, we can achieve something meaningful. And by the way, I had to cut the rest of the picture because that was quite unrealistic, let me put it in this way. Another example, this is an AI music generator. Again, something exciting. I have, when I was in Shanghai last month, the speaker was talking about the music generation. And he said he generated a song for his grandmother. And the grandmother said, "Oh, you shouldn't have done it. You are so busy. You must have spent hours doing it." And he said, no, it took me 2 seconds to do that, to create a song about his grandmother being a lovely person with a lovely dog and so on. He made a mistake that he left the logo of the AI application. So suddenly all these investors are downloading the AI app in the audience. So I'm trying to avoid that mistake, so I'm not disclosing or arguing, and especially for any AI music generator. But again, what we can learn from this is that we are really getting better and better in using of AI, and this is just a beginning. And there are some glimpses of its use for environmental monitoring. So this example over here, it's an initiative by one of the NGOs in Europe. They try to monitor the fishing nets which are dropped in the ocean and which collect a lot of rubbish or kill fish. And what they're trying to do, of course, they use AI to analyze where these locations might be, but they also interact with people who might be fishing around or be on the boat or go for diving to verify these locations for them. So in this way, they can train the AI model to become more precise in this particular case to monitor the spots in the ocean where we can see the culmination of these leftover nets. And I'll come back to this example a little bit later to explain how that can serve as a platform to monitor intelligently sustainability. And the last thing I'd like to mention in this introductory part is the fact that maybe, just maybe, we talk about AI too much because there are other very significant trends at the marketplace these days. And I would like to just point to robotics and design of robots. So we can think about that as a hardware of AI, if you like. This would be quite handy, right? So this robot is taking care of your baby and ironing at the same time. You can have a sleep. Maybe in the future we will experience that. Some people predict within 20 years, which sounds a little bit too futuristic, but maybe. And the second thing I'd like to mention is that we are also entering an era of quantum computing. And that will bring us enormous potential to analyze even greater amount of data and also go much deeper in understanding of human life. Again, I'll come back a little bit into that as we progress. So let me now go back to reality, away from AI and all of these things, and let's have a look at some of the issues in the supply chain. And I've picked up 3 or 4 examples, as I mentioned at the beginning, to demonstrate what are the problems. So the first one, I'd like to talk about fishing. I think most of you are aware about the fact that we have been overfishing for quite a long time. There are some predictions about when actually there is no fish in the oceans. These numbers and the years keep on changing, but there is a risk really to that this is going to happen. And so apart from this fact, we've got a lot of different issues that are happening and should not be happening. So for example, one of the most unsustainable practice of fishing is bottom trawling. It's extremely efficient from a catching fish point of view. But what happens when the fishing vessel is adopting this technology, they just scrape off everything at the bottom of the ocean, including the coral reefs. And what tends to happen during using this technology also is another problem, which is a bycatch, meaning that you are fishing for a particular species, but alongside the way you also catch dolphins and other fish that you don't necessarily want to catch. Now, the issue, I think, for us as a consumers is that I believe most of you would prefer that if you need to eat fish, it would be caught in some ethical manner without causing this damage or collateral damage. And there are some horrible stories. I'm mentioning here disappearance of inspectors. If you are interested in that, David Ospina is one of the journalists at Washington Post. He wrote a book called Ocean Outlaw, in which he monitors the fact that the people who are, by governments, for example, put on these vessels, face very severe conditions, and quite frequently they disappear accidentally in the ocean. And I think people don't have a lot of awareness about the fact that these kind of things are happening in our oceans. And final thing I'd like to say, if we look at the statistics of fish-related fraud, meaning mislabeling largely the fish, you see the statistics are quite horrific, in some countries over 40%, and other statistics will show you even higher numbers. And that means, for example, that in the US, if you go to a restaurant, there is a 40% chance that the fish you order is not the fish that is on the menu. It could be a different species, it could come from a different location. And again, it's a problem of monitoring, if you think about it, because preferably you would like to know exactly where the fish is coming from. Very quickly, a few other examples. These images are actually from Canada. which is quite disappointing because Canada has got quite strict regulations in terms of forestry. One of the most unsustainable practice is called clear cutting, meaning you just destroy the whole thing. Again, we need to mine trees, but we can do it responsibly, not in this particular way. Again, one of the problems I think you are aware of is deforestation and illegal logging, and this is one of the things that we really need to address in order to maintain the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. One more or two more examples. This example is from cotton or textile. If we look at what we may label as unsustainable practices, water consumption, a huge amount of usage of nitrogens and substrates, pesticides. And then if we look at the t-shirts themselves and the process of coloring, for example, in terms of environmental impact, massive, very, very negative impact. And again, there are many technologies which can do it differently. However, we don't know much about what these are, and we need to find a better way to go about it. So without continuing with many other examples, what I would like you to consider right now is the fact that what you see on all of these examples are practices that you cannot directly observe. You don't know, for example, where the fish is coming from. You cannot taste it and say, oh, this fish is from Japan. It's been contaminated with the radioactive material. You cannot say that. You cannot say where the t-shirt is coming from and whether on the farm they have used excessive chemicals and so on. So really the question is, can we find a way to make others informed about it? So here comes the idea of different tools, such as ESG, as I mentioned at the beginning. And all of these different tools are trying to determine a framework through which an organization would address the issues related to sustainability. So if you work in a company and you either want to or you ask to do, you pick up one of these frameworks and then deliver, in case of ESG, a report which will specifically explain what are your environmental credentials. It sounds all good. However, if we look at the actual efficiency of these mechanisms, they are pretty poor. And I've mentioned at the beginning the example with the contaminated lake, when all of these actors who contributed to contamination actually passed this inspection. They may have produced an ESG report, or they may use some other tool. And the impact of that is not as strong as we would expect. There are also very globally focused frameworks. I was part of development of this global standard, ISO 26000, 80 countries working on defining what is sustainability, and 300 experts. It took us 5 years to produce this document. It was ratified by most countries across the world. But at the end, if I would say, did it have any impact? I have to be very honest and say, not really. From the very beginning, whatever companies might have been affected, they've done everything they could to stop this. And it, at the end, became a guidance document. It's a very, very good document. It's a great framework. There is a lot of ideas about sustainability. But as an instrument to enforce organizational following this sustainability, unfortunately, it doesn't work. And this is in particular a cautionary tale, because imagine an organization which has got global outreach, membership of most of the countries, about 220 countries are part of this. The governments send their representative. It is used as part of the international trade. And despite all of that, it does not work. So we need to think about how we might do it differently. So let me talk about what are the alternatives. And these are the alternatives in terms of bringing this issue directly to the consumers. So all of these instruments I've started to talk about, like ESG, typically are instruments their businesses are using between themselves, or governments are using, or supply chains. So the idea of these other instruments, which I label as perhaps better solution, is to signal to you as a consumer that the product has got some sustainability credentials, right? So for example, in China, you might have seen this label, organic, right? So if you see a product such as Apple with this label, it's signaling to you that the product has been cultivated through some sustainability practices. So organic means limited use of pesticides, there is a limited use of other chemicals, and so on and so forth. We have similar labels for many different products. So for example, Marine Stewardship Council is a global label for fish used across the globe. And again, the idea is if you buy this fish, you are assured that all of these dirty practices that I have mentioned before are not happening when the fish is caught. So the fisheries would adhere to the quotas, they would not use these technologies that damage the environment, and so on and so forth. Last example, this chair is certified by FSC. This is the most famous and dominant certification scheme in the world. And it's actually telling you that the wood that came into the chair has been grown in a forest that is cultivated in a sustainable way. Now, what all of these, not all of these, but most of these different labels do, they have quite complicated infrastructure to ensure that actually this happens. So if I pick up on FSC and you see this chair, the starting point really is to define what is sustainable forestry, right? What is the wood that is sustainable? So this organization spent several years talking with scientists and many different stakeholders to provide this definition. So that's the first step. The second step is you have to make sure that others follow the standard. So if you certify the wood, you have to be sure that the forest has been grown in the way that is specified in this standard. And what happens is that typically the FSC organization sends their auditors to the forest. They inspect all the documents, they monitor the forest itself in quite complicated system. So if we look at for example, how a furniture would be certified, the auditors would go to the forest itself. The forest have to grow a tree. Then the tree is labeled and each log has got a unique traceable label. It goes to a factory. The factory has to use only equipment that handles this sustainable wood. And then at the end, you have a furniture. It's a very, very complex system. And in every stage, you would have auditors coming in and inspecting the organization. So it is very, very demanding. So what I'm trying to explain by portraying this situation is that we've got all of these people who work in these organizations who are constantly monitored and audited, and they have to fill in a lot of paperwork. And of course, over time, they become a little bit cynical about it, and then more actors come in, and they may not have a very high ethical standards, and they can start to fabricate different documents, and then suddenly we are in a space where we are mixing together the genuine actors with the actors who are not necessarily as genuine as we would expect. So despite all of these efforts, a lot of the money coming in and the auditors, it is very hard for the organizations to absolutely make sure that the products, whether it's a fish or it's an apple or it's a chair, is what it is. It is not completely bad, it's better, but it still does not fully work. So what we can do differently, and now comes the part about the technologies and what technologically is possible these days. And we will observe through these examples that there are a lot of things that we can do in a much smarter way and actually avoid a lot of these bureaucratical parts that are inherited in the current system. I'll start from examples of unmanned aerial vehicles. So this is in literature typically a collection of drones, so the low altitude, if you like, type of equipment. This is a stratospheric plane. So these planes operate in stratosphere about 30 kilometers above the ground. This plane is made by a New Zealand company. It's fully running on the solar power, and it can stay up in the stratosphere for 3 months and longer. And what the plane is doing, it's just collecting data. It's constantly scanning the environment, scanning the ground, using different equipment, such as these cameras that you can see here. And it's really amazing what you can do with this technology, because you can of course create an image of the ground, but also you can create a 3D picture of the ground itself. You can monitor, for instance, the trees and the density of the trees. You can monitor biodiversity by identifying different species and replicate that by collecting the data from the stratosphere. And some of it you can do even from a satellite. Of course, this is a little bit more expensive. The resolution tends to be also lower, but still you can achieve incredible insights into what is happening on the ground. Currently, even a pixel size of 30 centimeters, which is like that, is possible from a satellite that high. And you mostly see it in the movies about war, right? Some espionage movie, you see a satellite really seeing the ground. So we have this technology, and we can use it for the purposes of monitoring, as I will explain in a moment. So this is one potential solution how to use it, and this is based on the project that I have done with my colleagues from different areas in New Zealand, different areas from social science, but we have also spatial scientists, we have computer scientists, and so on and so forth, all of us trying to figure out how we may use satellite images to monitor farming and replace all of these different activities that I've mentioned before, such as an auditor coming in and scrutinizing a water, whereas we can either install a sensor here, or even from a satellite you can, to some extent, monitor water quality. You can also monitor soil quality, you can monitor biodiversity, or you can monitor, for example, the distance animals are away from the waterway, because animals contribute to the contamination of the water. So all of that, instead of sending an auditor who comes once in 2 or 3 months, and the farmer is already ready, so they would move away the animals and they would clean up, the auditor comes, inspects, everything is great, goes back, looks at the documents, it's good, you know, we have done this, this and that. But then half a year, nothing happens. So we can technically do that on 24/7 basis, and AI can very easily monitor a lot of these aspects. And perhaps this is something which will happen in the future, but a willingness to do that from the industry these days is not as such. And I'm talking here about Western world mostly. Another outlook in what's possible technologically, it's a technology around DNA fingerprinting. This is a very fascinating example. I was talking before about the chain of custody when you go to the forest, and then the wood goes to the wood processing, and then it goes to the factory, and then it goes to the supermarket. All of these stages being monitored. Well, we can technically just go at the very end and pick up the wood from the furniture to determine where the wood is actually coming from. And it would not be perfect in terms of having all of the attributes or sustainability attributes in place, but it might be good enough to indicate that the wood is, for example, from Russia or is from Indonesia, and do a follow-up if we need to. There are some products where the accuracy is just breathtaking. So one example is traceability of cotton or textile. What is now possible is if I cut off a piece, and we will use this technology, we would know with 100% accuracy where the cotton is coming from. This is extraordinary. And again, if you think about it, it would mean that we don't have to monitor and trace the product from the source. We can simply look at the usefulness of the product itself and determine these qualities at the end of the supply chain. This company happens to be also in New Zealand. This is from University of Otago. And they have verified the technology last year. And these are the results, which are really stunning. 100% accuracy in determining where the cotton is from. Even if the cotton would be mixed. So if you would mix cotton, part of it would come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, or other areas. And during the manufacturing process, you would put it together. This technology would tell you 50% of this shirt is from the cotton which was grown in this location. Now, this is impressive, and if we transfer it into other domains, such as fish, for example, where it's also being used, in the future, you might be able to pick up the fish at home and do a very simple test on the device to know exactly where the fish is coming from. So that would avoid a lot of the cost that is going into this monitoring which doesn't work, and where technology can actually work far greater. Image analysis, we talk about boats as well and the malpractices. There is a very simple solution and very cheap technology, and that's to install a camera and run the image through an AI, and you can see everything that has happened on the boat. You can see how much bycatch, for example, the crew has collected during the fishing. You can see the gear that they use, everything. There is no need for a human to be there or monitor. But of course, fishery is a very, very dirty business and unregulated business. So we may see these applications in some areas, in some parts of the world. And I would suggest that if you eat fish and you want to eat sustainable fish, try to look at fish that is coming through these monitoring processes, because that is giving you at least some idea and assurance what has happened in the extended supply chain. So if we broadly look at these technologies, I can continue on and on talking about other technologies with a very similar message, and message really being that if we use these technologies smartly, we can achieve a lot of positive monitoring aspects and outcomes in how we go about monitoring and sustainability. I talk about drones, I talk about satellites. I didn't talk about social media, which in fact is a very interesting source of data. And in fact, in food safety, for example, it seems to be a very good solution to identify outbreaks of contaminated food or any problems in the supply chain by simply web scraping data from social media and running it through AI algorithms. And we will see more and more of that. I didn't talk much about social crowdsourcing, but if I go back to the example that I've given at the beginning about the heat map of where is located the drop-off fishery gear, and the fact that we are trying to ground truth the locations, this is a good example of using really people and volunteers who can verify the data and add to the creation of these AI models that can help us to monitor sustainability practices. So let me come into conclusion slowly by talking about what we can do and what might be the different pathways how we may achieve a better outcome in terms of monitoring sustainability. I've got 4 different pathways that I would like to share with you. And I think these pathways are broad enough to perhaps give you some inspiration of what is possible, mainly for your outlook of how you might get involved, but also maybe in your research where you can start exploring this different pathway in more detail to understand how we may do things differently. I think I talked already a little bit about this first one. I label it as a hotspot or a micro-to-micro pathway. What it essentially means is that if we take satellites and geospatial monitoring, this is a data which comes across the whole globe, potentially, or very large locations. And the main task is to find a way how to use these data to identify more precisely of where is the problem. And this is what we call a hotspot. So, for example, in Europe, there are several countries where illegal immigrants are enslaved, typically in agriculture, for example, in Greece or Spain. And one way to tackle this problem is to use satellites. So satellites can provide images all over Greece or all over Spain. And of course, you can see anything if you like. Now the question is, out of this huge amount of data, how can you figure out a particular location where this problem might be present? Because if you do that with some level of accuracy, you can send few auditors or police directly to that location and solve the problem. And this is far easier than doing it across the whole country, because that is impossible. So one way to do that is actually very simple, and that is to monitor continuously appearance of illegal dwellings. So these organizations and black societies, what they tend to do, they quickly establish some housing, and in the housing they would process fish, or they would pack strawberries, whatever they need to do. So the satellite image can monitor this emergence of these particular hotspots. Of course, not all of them would be illegal, and not all of them might be or have this problem, but it can give you, for example, 20 locations, and then you can quickly go and identify the problem. So this method has been employed in Greece. It's also being used in Thailand, because Thailand historically has got a lot of problems with people being enslaved in fisheries and in fish processing supply chains. So very simple, if you like, elegant way to do that. I already talked about this gear, dropped fishing gear example. I think that example also tells us something about the social crowdsourcing, if you like, or bringing others into these monitoring activities and helping us to create a better precision or improve really the AI model as well. So we need to find really a way to engage people. If you look at this particular website, you will see a lot of different activities of people joining in. They may go sailing, for example, in Croatia and explore that particular part of ocean, send back images, and those images verify what the AI would determine from a satellite image, and then the learning mechanism would make that process better and better. In the past, if you watched the news maybe in the 90s, what NGOs were mostly doing, like Greenpeace, they would take out the boats, they would try to stop a tanker or do something to that extent. I believe in the future we will see the activities going more in this way, of engaging people and addressing the problems in a very smart and engaging way. The second pathway is the opposite one. So we might have a lot of data collected at locations, micro to macro pathway, I call it. And the question really is how we can leverage and link together this data coming from individual locations into making a bigger picture and then trying to understand what is going on. One example I have for you, this is a project from United Nations University in Macau, and what they did is they tried to monitor people who are enslaved in sex trafficking. And a very simple idea they came up with is to have an application on the phone where volunteers would go around in locations where sex workers are exploited and having or pretending they want to engage with them and collecting data from these workers. And this application has got over 100 languages, so the people who collect the data may not necessarily speak the language, but they can quickly engage with the sex worker to identify the language they can understand, secretly take photos, and send this data to the United Nations so they can use that to identify the pathway where people are being trafficked. It's a very smart idea. Again, we're talking here about intelligent monitoring and the fact that we need to find better ways to address these problems. And the way we've been doing it so far, by inspecting and forcing others to produce paperwork, does not necessarily work. And we also observe broadly in supply chain emergence of these platforms where even organizations share this data with others. And I'm hopeful this will happen more and more in the future, where we can become smarter by collecting data on the ground and leveraging the data for the benefit of others. The third pathway, this is where I spend most of my time, is to work with organizations who are doing this monitoring in a traditional way and try to find ways to do it differently. In fact, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to Jakarta to speak to United Nations, and one of the projects I've done with them last year was looking at remote audits and how we can do things remotely. And my message in this report, which I co-written with one of the United Nations person, is that we need to develop a system of AI analytics which combines these macro and micro level perspectives into some meaningful way to determine and monitor sustainability. What I find fascinating working with United Nations on this is how many people are really involved and willing and passionate about changing the things. But at the same time, I believe if we don't help them and we don't find a different way to appreciate the things they do, they will very simply disappear over time. Because the other forces I've mentioned at the beginning, ranging from politics to extreme economic situation, will not be favorable to these kind of activities. And the final pathway, and I think this is probably the most understandable, is that we need to develop more and more approaches and algorithms to analyze problems and transfer these different regulatory frameworks into something that an algorithm can resolve. That should be relatively straightforward things, providing, again, we have data. And I think all of these examples that I was giving here had this one thing in common, and that is, it seems to be all about the data. And unfortunately, that is the problem in sustainability. We have a lot of data how to create AI for music or based on how people consume products for marketing purposes. It's an enormous amount of data that we can use. But we don't necessarily have the same quality data that would help us to monitor sustainability related issues. So in conclusion, what is intelligent monitoring, and what I was trying to explain to you today as an important aspect of sustainability. Intelligent monitoring, few things that are very important. Number one, technologies, we have them. They are, of course, in a different stage of development, but we are really reaching a space when the technologies are so widely available at a cost that we can do a lot of different things. So the problem are not necessarily the technologies, but it is about data collection and data exchange and how we develop the overall system that will allow us to do this monitoring. And I hope you got some examples from today about what that could mean in a practice. The second point I'd like to make, that if we talk about doing things intelligently, it has to be done at a global level. One of the reasons we observe these problems in supply chains in terms of sustainability is very simple, and that is every country has got a particular legislation, but we don't have an international legislation that could force and reinforce sustainability across the globe. So that's why we need all of these different regulatory tools and approaches that help us to do it globally. And without doing that, we will not succeed really to achieve sustainability in a true sense of the word. What I mean by intelligent as well is we have to facilitate decision-making through superior veracity. Veracity means accuracy. Timeliness, meaning we need really real data, real-time data. And this particular final part, I believe, is very important. And that is to present these findings in a way that transform the behavior of people. We have to find ways to bring it closer to the hearts of people who can use this insight in everyday life. And this is something influencers, for example, are doing very well. And at the beginning, I was talking about AI influencers and the fact that people could be interested, they could be drawn into areas which some of us might find a little bit unfortunate or not so interesting. And we need to find more ways how to do that also in terms of sustainability. How to bring this to the psychological proximity of people, if you like. Some countries are quite successful in doing that. I've mentioned to many of you maybe in the past the fact that in countries like Switzerland, people get a real-time information about different fish stocks, and they get a hint of what they should or should not buy. So you can very quickly check on your phone, and then you can make it part of your decision making. And we need more of that, and we can observe through the social media and how we interact with social media that essentially this information can be customized to you with a very, very precise way. If you look at how you read news, for example, these days, this news is presented to you by an algorithm that knows you maybe better than you know yourself. Well, can we do the same with sustainability? And this is what I mean by providing transformative insights. Insights that are really touching you and helping you out. Now the final 2 slides is, I was trying to search for some image. I've typed in the keyword life in 2050. And most of the images that came out were looking something like that, which is very nice, but it looks more or less how we live, right? We are quite lucky to live in Suzhou. We've got a lot of beautiful areas around which may look similar. The car is maybe a little too futuristic. But apart from that, what is life in 2050? And I like to mention that because when we talk about sustainability, we have to see in the future what will be the life and what will be the dominant way of how we go about taking decisions, what we buy, how do we interact with each other, and so on. And this is very important because if we don't do that, we may stick up with the old monitoring practices that I was today presenting as not really working. So what I had in mind was a slightly different image, and I've quickly sketched this image of life in 2050. And this is based by different futuristic visions. The first one, and I mentioned at the beginning, quantum computing is coming. And with quantum computing, we will see a diagnostics where we go far below the molecular level in terms of scrutiny and of what is happening in our bodies. And if you read a lot of literature around quantum computing, one of the key aspects when they explain how it's going to impact our life in 2050, you've got this image of you take a shower in the morning and the quantum computer is is collecting samples from your body in the toilet, in the shower, analyzing and going in the analysis as far as predicting that you may be in a risk of cancer or you may have some other disease. Maybe not even starting yet, but going into that trajectory, just based on that analytics. Now, that is probably helpful. It could be scary as well, right? If you think about it. But let us link it to other aspects of what others are thinking 2050 will look like. So people who work in robotics are quite adamant by 2050, this is how we're going to live. So the robot will chop the tomatoes. I don't like to do that, so that's good. But perhaps the robot also will be sort of your personal assistant, a manifestation of AI, if you like, in a humanoid form, and assisting you with a lot of different decisions, right? You would expect that this data about your health will go to this system, and maybe the robot will be, or the AI will work with others, AI systems to purchase food for you. And the food might be coming from different sources that are going to be monitored through these technologies I've been talking about. And the AI system will talk with each other to figure out what is your base nutritional portfolio of food that you can buy. You can plug in the algorithm that will perhaps be more specific about your values. You, for example, don't want to eat fish from a particular location. You don't want to do this or that. You want to support particular company maybe. And all of this information could be automated in a way that we don't even have to think about it. I don't know whether this is a great future. I personally am not very touched by that. But what I'm touched by, and I think what it tells us, is that this is most likely coming in our lifetimes or lifetimes of our children. And we need to consider it right now in terms of what we do about sustainability, how we go about it, and how do we create a better system that will motivate more and more people to behave responsibly, to live responsibly, and support our quest to leave this planet, I would say, not as it is, but perhaps better than it is. And this is my final point that I find really puzzling about sustainability. Very often people think, oh, the role of sustainability is to leave to the future generation the planet as we have been living in it, right? Imagine you are sitting at home and you are old, a grandmother or grandfather, and you're talking to your children and grandchildren, and you would say, well, when I was a kid, our family was poor, and I'm leaving you poor. You know, I've done a good job. I've maintained the level of our family wealth. This is not very inspirational. Shouldn't we define sustainability as we would like to leave actually the place better than we were given it, because our responsibility is to add something to it. So please consider that in your life, and I hope you found some inspiration about how you might think about sustainability, how you might engage sustainability, and how you might use this insight in your personal life. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Castka, for this really enlightening lecture. Now we would like to open the floor for questions and discussions. We will be also taking questions from the audience online, so if you have any question, just drop us a line. We will try to get back to you. So any questions? Yes, please.
Sorry, can you
thank you. It's very interesting and informative presentation. However, I want to address some issue from accounting perspective, because I'm accounting man. So most of this is already done in macro level or in like global or country level. But there is a problem with business. When you speak about micro, there is no enforcement for example, for ESGs. Even there is a global standard like GRI for sustainability, but it's still voluntarily. Also, there is no assurance and auditing enforcement. So how do you think this is AI technology can help in this issue? How we can link AI to make it enforce business to perform sustainable way, and also verify their reports, whatever they put in their website. Because many big companies as well, they have also greenwashing cases. So could you add something about how we can use AI technology to improve sustainability practice and to also assure or audit sustainability practice in the business level?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a very, very important question to consider. First of all, I've missed one slide, so this will give me an opportunity to add to that. Greenwashing and what is happening, right? Fully agree, this is a huge problem. What we can observe these days more frequently is there is more and more lawsuits being filed against the companies, right? This is a very interesting example from US, a case filed last year, I think it was September or October. This is a company in the US, a meat producing company, and they have started a quite large and impactful marketing campaign. They're saying by 2040, not 2030, 2040, we're gonna be carbon zero. Now what, and this case is the government, so people against this JBC company. What the government is saying, well, you have no proof that this is anything beyond your intention. And the company actually won the first round, so this is another aspect of it. But what I'm trying to say here is there will be more and more pressure on organizations because of this lawsuit will become more frequent, right? If you look at in Europe, what is happening, the voluntary space or voluntary regulation is slowly transferring to the mandatory regulation, meaning that the European Union is looking for even personal liability of managers in organizations who would, for example, employ or have modern slaves or illegal workers playing in the supply chain. Now this is quite different to voluntary spaces you rightly talk about, right? Yes, because suddenly you might be personally held accountable and go to jail as a sourcing manager. This will not pass into legislation. I consulted that with legal colleagues, and there is a lot of steps to take that. My personal opinion, ESG, I think, is very poorly defined in different parts of the world. There is a different meaning of it. There are different standards. GRI might be a great standard, but it's like ISO. It's a great standard, but no reinforceability. I don't think this is the way of the future. The way of the future is to linking consumers more neatly into these issues and forcing organizations then to make more precise proofs of what is happening. The business-to-business space, I'm very skeptical, to be honest, about it. It can improve if we can verify the data, if the data is shared, but again, it would require organizations to share the data in the first place. They are not going to do that. So that is a blind road. But I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic because I'm looking at the younger generation, how they interact with products, for example, what they eat. You look at the European countries, now about 20% of younger generations actually don't consume milk because they disagree with the practices of the dairy industry. And they also consider it about the impact of dairy products on their health. So there is a lot of different ways to go about it, and it's all about education, education, and education, yes. Microphone, please.
Do you agree about, I think it is all also about business culture, because education, because if we have a new generation, they believe in sustainability. If they are manager, worker, whatever, they will help
Yeah.
Because the problem with radical like people, you present some political leader or even in management, because there is conflicts of interest. We have manager, we have owner, we have profit, we have social responsibility. So I think it is about the culture, education, the beliefs of the management. And this is the problem still in accounting, how we can motivate managers to perform sustainably or provide environmental performance through information for social, and this way.
True.
Yeah, it still is a puzzle, I don't know.
Yes, yeah. Well, there is an answer, but there are so many companies who want to do it properly. And that's the hope. And if we focus on those and focus our purchasing intentions and behaviors towards organizations which are very transparent about what they do, that could be the first step. But the world is unlikely to be perfect. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions or comments?
They would not hear you online, so yeah.
Very simple question.
Okay.
Who's doing the monitoring?
Sorry, say again.
Who's monitoring?
Yes.
And second question, why don't we have a global regulation?
Why don't we have global regulation? Well, why don't we agree on tariffs, right, easily? That is a key question of the humankind, right? We tend to focus on competing or at least some of us. There are regional organizations. There are also global organizations like ISO, right? So these standards are part of a global scheme. So in trade, these standards have to be used. And there are also sustainability standards that are part of trade agreements. And I think those will stay. The problem is reinforceability of these standards and the level of corruption within the system, right? The monitoring is extremely difficult to do. But we can, as I was alluding to today, we can become better and more precise. Now, who is monitoring? I mean, that is a very important question. I think where we're going with the AI and the idea, for example, of crowdsourcing, or involving people in the monitoring, ultimately it should be all of us monitoring in some way, right? If our level as a humankind, our level of maturity is high enough, we would recognize the problem. We would use, for example, satellites to monitor biodiversity, and then we would channel investments to improve the areas that would need that. But that is the ideal world. So that's coming to Omar's question at the beginning, right? How can we really improve that? And we can do that step by step. And I think it is getting better. We made some progress, but we need more ideas, more smart ideas. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question from our online audience for Professor Castka.
Thank you.
How can sustainability be achieved in a bank system? In broader sense, if we consider sustainability in the service industry, what aspects can we think about?
That's a very, very good question. Bank sector, for example, we can think about it as in terms of energy consumption. So that's one aspect of it. I think when we talk about cryptocurrency, for example, one of the problematic aspects of that is how much energy it does actually consume. So that is one aspect. The other one I'd like to highlight as well is how we use finance, right? And very often we hear the term green finance, and there are different layers of what the meaning actually is of the green finance. And when we've done our project in New Zealand, we had some financial people working with us, and we were in particular focused on a niche group, if you like, of investors who are looking for impact. And there is this group of investors who are interested in investing into projects which benefit of those is not only financial or purely financial, but they're looking at organizations who can say, if this will be done and this investment will be channeled into a new product, for example, as an outcome of it, this is a particular environmental benefit, right? And we have seen this investment helping a lot of very innovative companies. If you look at construction industry, for example, one of the big problems in construction or larger emission is from cement and concrete. So a lot of companies invested into technologies that inject the CO2 into the concrete, and actually the concrete serves as a CO2 capture mechanism, right? And this is the kind of thing where the finance industry could be even more focused. I talk about textile industry and the fact that coloring and using a lot of chemicals to color, even some beautiful colors like this, could have a very significant negative impact. Well, we had investments into technologies which don't use any water, for example, and use very mild chemicals to achieve that. So this is where I would see the finance industry to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel, for this really fascinating presentation. I think one thing I like most is the technology meet sustainability topic, which are the two topics really hot today. I totally agree with you that in this whole process, including the remote monitoring, data is the king. But in the process of collecting data, storage data, and data analytics, one thing we have to consider is the consumption of energy. Put tremendous pressure on energy, which is not, which cannot be supplied endlessly. So the question is really, in this process, with so much demand on energy, which is probably on the other side of being environmentally friendly or sustainable, right? So how can we reconcile between these two sides, the bright side where you presented many solutions, to the dark side where there is a tremendous pressure on the precious resource that we actually need, maybe for other important things as well. Yeah, thank you.
Very good question, kind of related to the finance industry as well, right? I still remember 10 or 15 years ago, I read an article from MIT, how much one Google search consumes in energy, right? And if I remember correctly, there was the argument was it's about boiling 1 liter of water, right? Now imagine if that's the case, that every time you click on Google search, whatever search engine you use, this is the amount of energy that goes into it, right? That is quite horrific. Now, does it mean we should stop searching? That's a very difficult question, right? It's a little bit like arguments about we should stop flying and everything will be okay. Other people will tell you, well, actually, if the whole humankind eats half of the meat that we consume at the moment, we would not have any CO2 emissions. So the trade-off is the key question here, right? Now, the energy consumption and energy security, if we take it into a geopolitical context, is an extremely difficult question to answer. My argument would be investing into technologies that can help us to generate green energy. And we are, again, getting better and better on this front. So yes, this does consume an energy. I would rather see energy being consumed for this kind of data than AI influencers who talk about unreal things. And that is our choice in some ways, right? So this is a very complicated question and very good one. Thank you.
If not, then let's thank Professor Castka for his lecture and his sharing his thoughts with us. We would also like to thank the audience online who are staying with us. We look forward to seeing you in our lecturing next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Future is next year or next moment. AI will transform the education from knowledge feeding to people development. To adapt to the quickly development of the world, university should be redefined. XGTLU is trying